so much for making your time to join our P.Talks today, and as well as our Malaysian Wood Expo 2023. So I saw some of you have actually spent like the whole day here with us. So thank you guys so much for the effort and time. So with us today we have Mr.Supun Nigamuni, the Managing Director of Control Union Malaysia Sdn Bhd, to share with us the future-proofing your business by setting up a solid ESG framework. I think before these sessions, right, I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of people asking me, Mandy, what's ESG framework? Can you brief me a little bit on this? Okay, so you can drop by, join our P.Talks, and you'll know what's the ESG framework. Mr. Supun will be the one that's briefing all things you through. Okay, so before I pass the floor over to Mr. Supun, I'm gonna give you guys a little bit background on Mr. Supun. Curious about? Are you guys curious about it? Yes, okay, thank you. Better than just now the first question, okay? Better than that. Much better. Thank you guys so much. So Mr. Supun is actually an accomplished forestry and environmental specialist with experience in compliance auditing, training, certification, program management, and environmental assessment. He serves as Managing Director for Control Union Malaysia and responsible for managing certification for Control Union. So is that what you're doing, Mr. Supun? Yes, okay. He said yes. Okay, so any one of you know what is Control Union Malaysia Sdn Bhd? Any one of you? Anyone? Or am I just talking to myself actually? Anyone? Yes? No? Yes or no? I know it's 5 o'clock, okay? I know it's almost dinner time, but after this is the last section, guys, okay? So, Control Union, I bet you guys not very sure about Control Union. Some of you maybe heard it, but not really sure what's it. So, Control Union is actually part of Peterson and Control Union Group, a family-owned company established in 1920. It's 1920 in the Netherlands. With roots agricultural inspections, the group has been operating for more than 100 years in the field of logistics, quality certification, and risk management. So as the Managing Director of Control Union Malaysia, Mr. Supun, you will be bringing us through how to set up ESG framework, right? Right? Yes. Okay, are you guys ready for the section? Yeah. Are you guys ready for the section? Okay, let's go.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Thank you very much for everybody to actually being here. It's 5 p.m. In the day and you all are eagerly waiting for the dinner. And likewise, so I'll make it interactive as much as possible. And thank you very much for MWE, MTC for giving us this opportunity to actually come and explain. And like what Mandy was saying, ESG. Is it a new thing, ESG? Is it a new thing? It's what I would say is actually kind of a repurposed, rebranded terminology of something that we have all been doing in bits and pieces. But now with the regulatory and the other requirements in place, it actually has come to that particular prominence. So this is why it's important for you to also understand what are the drivers and how you as a company should actually set up your management in compliance with the ESG norms. So before going further, let me just give a quick introduction into the company. Mandy was actually already discussing on it. So we are part of Peterson Control Union Group, which is a Dutch holding company, which is operating since 1920 across the world. And now we have grown into a company operating in more than 85 countries with very close to 6,000 people within the group. And we operate on the aspects of managing supply chain related risks. So certifications is one of the main things that what we do, and we also have some other tools we are operating in this space. In Malaysia, we have been in existence for the past 35 years, more or less. So we started up in 1987, so this is one of our oldest operations in Asia. We have now a strong team of very close to 160 people across 7 locations, where our main office is located in Klang, but we are also having presence in Sabah and Sarawak, in Bintulu, KK and Lalato as well. So what we do, most of you know us for our certification portfolios, but being a risk manager, we work on various markets from biofuels, biomass, which we are the world's largest certification and assurance body, and forestry is also one of our core areas. But what we are mainly known for is actually on the scopes of agriculture and aquaculture, which we are basically the world's largest assurance body for agriculture and aquaculture activities. And we work on various themes for textile and recycling, metals and minerals, oil and gas, across various verticals. Most of you are certified for some certification, maybe MPCC or FSC, for an example. Why do you need certification? Basically, you need certification as a way to actually manage your risks and also to access certain markets. So this is why through our array of services, from certifications to commodity inspections, from industrial inspections to collateral services, so we manage supply chain related risks. In Malaysia, we are a critical operation. We also hold various accreditations in addition to our global accreditations, but we are also part of the associations. We are part of INDIC, Malaysian Biomass Industrial Confederation. We are part of MWE, and we are also a member of MWIA and also STIA. So we have also very strong ties with STIA and working on various matters. So we are basically working on all 3 regions in Malaysia, trying to basically push the industry towards betterment. So our services, all the way from certifications to commodity inspections to industry inspections, we are looking into the entire supply chain related risks. Within the group, we have various logistical companies like Food Conveyor, Guns Cargo. So we basically reduce the risks associated across all the way until the end consumer. So when it comes to forestry and forest products, we believe that we have the most rounded value proposition to the forestry industry in Malaysia, being the only certification body who is dual approved for MPCS forest management and also for FSC forest management in Malaysia. And in addition to that, we were the second monitoring organization approved by European Commission for UTR, and we are also approved for STLVS, because previously you were listening to a speech from MTIB. So Malaysia has 3 legal timber tracking schemes. One for Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia, which is MyTilas, one for Sabah, Sabatilas, and STLVS as actually for Sarawak. So Malaysia has 3 schemes in place, and we are approved for STLVS, that's actually for Sarawak part. And also we are approved certification body for CE marking, and also after the Brexit, UK CA marking as well, mainly for construction timber going into Europe. Not just the standard certification, we also work on the traceability related matters, because certification may not be the thing which is the only driver. Because when you say larger corporate like IKEA, so IKEA actually have a policy under their IWay set up, so they need all the suppliers to be certified for FSC and PFC. FSC, so that's the sustainability norm that they are using. So in that sense, they have already mandated their suppliers to actually meet certain set of requirements. But not everybody has that leverage power to ensure that their supply chain is environmentally appropriate, socially responsible, and also the governance aspects are taken care of. So that's why it's very important for the bigger buyers, supermarket chains, to know where their materials are coming from. So that's why traceability has actually become a very important part. And also we basically conduct third-party assurance against ESG performance. We don't look into this as the forestry industry or the timber industry, but we look into the other aspects, what the industry can actually be driven, also on the non-timber, packaging, biomass, tourism, as well as carbon and the other social compliance related matters. So we have credentials and approvals for all these matters. I'll explain you briefly. And we have basically worked with many brands across the world in advocating on their corporate strategies, and also to advocating certain governments on certain strategies, especially like the Dutch government on the biomass and the GHG policies. And we have also developed a lot of standards, like the first biomass standard which was actually developed, which was for Green Gold label, which was developed at the time for Essent, RWE, which is one of the largest utilities power producers in Europe. And in the same, we have developed various standards, even the Global Recycling Standard, which is the largest standard at the moment, was developed by Control Union before handing over to Textile Exchange. And very recently, we also developed Region Agri Standard, so one of a kind regenerative agriculture standard. And we have also been in the advising capacity for various roundtables. So, coming to the topic, what is ESG? As I explained, it's something which we have all been doing. Environmental part, you may have all been doing. Social parts also, you may have your internal practices of hiring people ethically, as well as having proper governance setups in place. So this is not something new, but this is what it has come to the prominence is actually that this has actually been highlighted in most of the regulation requirements. Even you must be aware of the European Union corporate sustainability disclosures, which are also coming up. So what is ESG? ESG is an approach of evaluating the extent to which corporates works, not just on maximizing the shareholder returns, but also works on the social, environmental and governance. So it goes beyond maximizing the shareholders' return and attaining the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. So this all, if you see, this is not new, because this has roots to the Rio Summit in 1990s when the first concerns on ESG was actually talked about. But over the years, this has actually emerged, developed into a way that every company has to have this as a framework, but not just as a department who's looking into ESG, not just one person who's looking into ESG, but embedded into the frameworks of how you operate. So this is very important. Those days I remember when we used to do audits, when I started my auditing career about 13 years back. So there was one guy in the company who was looking for certification. He was the only one who knew certification, and he was the only one who drove the entire certification. But not anymore. ESG, sustainability, is actually something now is having impact all the way from the board level. So this is not something that you keep on a side. It's something which has to be embedded into how you do things day in and day out. So that is why it's actually important. So, and this ESG is not a risk. Most of the people most of the companies see environmental, social governance and all these compliance issues which are coming up as a risk. Look into this as an opportunity. Every dark cloud has a silver lining, so this is also like that. So ESG is a distinct opportunity for you to actually evolve and differentiate among your peers. So this is where it's actually is important. I'll explain to you how this has actually come to the prominence, and more importantly, ESG norms, how we used to drive our companies. Those days, he's the big boss. He decides how his company runs. That's how most of our companies, especially the SME sector, has been evolved. But if you take a lead from the big boys, it's not just the top managements of the companies who drive how the company should perform, how the company should look into in the future. It's all the stakeholders. Stakeholders means who are associated with. It can be your employees, so these are the internal stakeholders, but also go out, your communities, the NGOs that you operate, the people who are directly or indirectly affected from your operations. So that's what we call stakeholders. So it's basically hearing what they have to say in basically strategizing the direction that you want to go. Let's look into the condition in Malaysia, how the ESG setting in Malaysia. So we see that the ESG norms is starting to get momentum, especially because of the drive from Bursa Malaysia. Bursa, I believe quite a few years back, Bursa together with the London Stock Exchange Group came up with the FTSE for Good Bursa Malaysia Index, which has become the local stock exchange measure for the ESG compliance. and this is actually gaining good momentum, not just for the listed companies but also for the non-listed companies. And what we also see is the Bank Negara Malaysia has recently issued the climate change and the principle-based taxonomy, which is also driving. And many of the financial institutions have started to integrate ESG into their lending practices and risk management. So this is the key driver now in Malaysia, and all the banking sector is actually gearing up. It's not that you are just getting paid the returns from the interest to the loans that you give, but you put the money where it matters. So all the banks are now roaming around and getting themselves prepared. So they look into their scope 3s. Banks are not just the buildings and the people who are in the banks, but also their scope 3, who are their outside parties that they work with. So that's something has become very, very prominent. So that's what we see is the main driver now, in addition to the regulations, the push from the financial institutions. And we have even seen when we talk to some companies in the timber sector from Sarawak and also to Sabah, they don't want to invest unless and such time you have a certification in place, because that assures that you are being managed sustainably. Because end of the day, if a company is actually targeted by an NGO likewise, that essentially is a risk to the financier who basically puts in money on that particular company. So this has actually been the key drivers, and this is elaboration from the FTSE for Good measure, so which we look into the environmental, social and economic and the governance norms. Governance, the main concepts we are looking into is anti-corruption, corporate governance, risk management, tax transparency. When you come to the environment, the main drivers are on biodiversity, what's the impact for climate change. Carbon is a big topic for everyone, pollution and resources, water security. And when it comes to social, corporate social responsibility, customer responsibility, health and safety, human rights and community, and also labor standards. I'll explain on these parts in detail, which are essentially material topics for any company. Yeah, as I told you, the rise for ESG has actually been mainly driven by the result of ESG investing. So ESG investing is actually nothing new. So this is the very first sightings of ESG investing we saw in early 1960s, when the social responsible investing with investors excluding the stock or entire industries from their portfolios based on the business activities such as tobacco production. So we saw this in early 1960s. If it's linked to tobacco, okay, we will not invest. So that was the very first inceptions of this. But this has now been evolved from this inception to various norms. Just to share with you, we now have green bonds, we have social linked bonds, we have sustainability bonds, and likewise. So when the International Capital Markets Association first published the green bond principles in 2014, so the market for self-labeled ESG bonds was small and homogeneous. Just looking to the statistics from 2014 to 2021, in 2014, the amount issued as ESG labeled bonds, so this is not just the sustainability bonds, climate linked bonds, social bonds, various forms of bonds which we consider as kind of green ESG linked. So this was at 28.42 billion, only in 16 sectors, issued in only 19 countries, and was issued in 13 currencies. This was in 2014. In just 7 years, what we have actually seen is that the ESG financing has actually now turned into $1 trillion dollar worth of bonds has actually been issued, and the 16 sectors have now become 101 sectors, and it has now been issued in more than 75 countries, and also issued in 34 currencies. We see even in the region how Singapore has actually advanced on these particular matters, how Indonesia has advanced. Malaysia is like normally lagging behind, but we see it's gaining momentum also in Malaysia as well. And ESG ratings, mainly for the listed companies, we see how it's actually being used to benchmark yourself against your competitors. You will see a lot of ESG ratings from Sustainalytics to MSCI to GSES and to FTSE for Good, what we use in Malaysia. So you will see where you are ranked up from a category of triple C, which we consider as laggards, all the way to a leader, which is triple A. So it's very important to understand where the industry stands and where you are. So if you are above the curve, that means you are doing better. So that's what's very important for you to actually identify as a tribe. So let's see how to actually set up a good ESG model in place. So first thing is actually to do a proper materiality study. We will get into the concept of what is material, what you consider material, because if you take a term like sustainable ESG, sustainability is not the same for you, for me, also for me, because it depends. Your priorities are different to my priorities. If you say you are in the oil and gas sector, I'm in the timber sector, your priorities are completely different to my priorities. So sustainability is not something which can actually be interpreted as fit for all purposes. It's not that. So that's why the concepts of materiality is very important. And then you have to understand where you are now. Because if you don't know where you are now, you don't know where you want to be. So it's a simple way of how we anyway develop a business plan. So it's very important, once you identify your priorities with yours and your stakeholders' participation, you need to identify where you are and then set up the objectives of where you want to be, and then look into the gaps, come with a strategic roadmap, come with actions, key performance indicators. So this will facilitate you to actually get from the baseline to where you want to be, and basically end of the day report progress. Most of the companies comes to us, okay, we want to actually publish a sustainability report. It's not that collect what you have and publish. That's not the way to do it. You have to basically go through the regime to understand the priorities established. Is it only your priorities, or also are these priorities of your stakeholders? And then clearly describe not the things that you do right. Most of the companies only want to report what they do right. And in this environment, we are not operating within closed walls. Everybody uses WhatsApp. Everybody uses various forms of communication. So the information is not something that we can actually tie up like those days. You need a thumb drive to enter to certain companies and even to access all the places. It's not that anymore. So information goes out. So it's all about communicating what you do right, and also more importantly what you need to improve. So that's very important. Let's look into the setting up the ESG framework in the frame of accountability principles. So accountability is one of the top bodies who basically prescribes how companies should perform in the form of ESG, and this is driven by four main principles of inclusivity, materiality, impact, and responsiveness. Let's look into the first principles on inclusivity. We discussed about the stakeholders. People should have a say in the decisions that impact them. Whether they are within your organization, whether they are outside of the organization, if they are impacted by your activities, what you do as a company, they should be heard. They should have a say. So it's very important for you to understand who your stakeholders are. It can be all the way from governments to shareholders to employees to the industry associations, communities, NGOs, your main business partners, your customers, your suppliers. Everybody is important in your journey as a company. Your impact is not only in your upstream, your impact is also in your downstream. So it's not just about doing within your walls. You are superb. You see what those days for the smartphone manufacturers and also for For an example, like the lithium-ion battery manufacturers, they are still being targeted because the mining for cobalt is actually done in Africa. And these are actually done in a setting which is actually not respecting the common wisdom and not taking care of the social component which they are. Forced labor is being used, child labor is being used. So it's not just within your walls. It's very important to understand. So this is upstream as well as downstream. Related to your activities which we consider scope 3 is very important. So it's very important to identify your stakeholders, give them the opportunity so they can raise their concerns and identify the areas that they want you to prioritize. So this is where we come into the concepts of materiality. So the decision makers then should identify and be clear about sustainability topics that matter. So previously sustainability from the GRI, if you look into the GRI systems, how it evolved. So previously it was like a fit for all. And now we have actually gone into materiality, which you, together with your internal and external stakeholders, identify what is material. So material topic is a topic which will substantially influence the impact, the assessments, decisions, actions and performance of an organization and or its stakeholders in the short, medium and long term. So there are various forms of topics which can actually be in kind of a consideration. So every company you decide with your peers, with your stakeholders, what can it be? This is not exclusive risk, exhaustive risk. So there are a lot of other topics, maybe for example like the COVID impact during the COVID. It's also a material topic. It's a socially material topic, or it can be a governance related topic as well. So it's these are certain issues that are important for a company or a business sector. So, but what we have even seen is that since it was opened up to decide among the stakeholders, we have seen different companies are using different norms. So it's very difficult to actually benchmark. So this is why even from the GRI standards perspective, the sectoral scopes are now being developed and being implemented. So for oil and gas sector, we have already a sectoral scope which is implemented. GRI 13 is actually the sectoral scope for agriculture, aquaculture and fishing. So this is mandatory to be reported from 1st of January 2024, and we see most of the companies are also going ahead with the GRI disclosures specific for the sector. So they have identified the priority sectors that they are going to work, and forestry is also one of the sectors. So forestry GRI sectoral standards will hopefully be out within this year or maybe next year. So we are going to see sectoral priorities established for various sectors. So this is how you need to map. I told you there are your priorities as an organization. There are priorities of stakeholders. So once you map it out, the most important ones are the things that you need to actually consider as material. You can consider these are least important. You don't need to put attention in the same level unless it's a sectoral standard like what we just discussed. So you have to identify with your stakeholders and your internal business success what are the areas that you want to actually focus. So let us walk through some of the topics what can be material, especially for the timber and the forestry sector. One of the key things is actually the schemes like that your buyers are being asked you to actually go for certification. When you want to access markets, you need certification. So this has been a very important material topic. So certification, you all know it's an activity that determines that the product or a process meets the relevant requirements. So when you see the FSC labels, that means this product has come out from a forest which is actually responsibly managed. So the FSC don't use the term sustainability, they use the term responsible management. Same goes with PFC as well. And labels, what we see is a clear reflection. When you have the labels, consumers know that this is actually coming from this area. So certification and labels can be either single attribute or a multi-attribute. So it's very important for you to understand. You may have a sawmilling operation. You may have FSC. It does not say that you are sustainable. It does not, now it talks about the core labor requirements on the labor norms, but it does not say that you are environmentally appropriate. Your pollutions are down and like that. It does not talk about that. It says that you will buy FSC material, you will produce it and you will sell it with proper traceability in place, but also taking care of your social requirements. So this is why it's important to know what you communicate. So it can be either single attribute or multiple attribute, and certification labels plays a very important role in day-to-day lives of ensuring that this timber what we see are not coming from deforestation. So you buy, you give that confidence that you are contributing to a worthy cause. Some other material, so when we take certification, there are voluntary certifications, there are mandatory certifications. So these are the drivers for you to decide. So when it's a government norm, when it's mandatory, you don't have a choice. You have to. So in certain cases, it can be voluntary as well. What we see is the gap between the voluntary and the mandatory setups are actually shrinking a lot. If you go to Sarawak, it's a mandate for you to actually become certified. Otherwise, your forest timber license were meant to be taken back. So now we see the margin between the voluntary and the mandatory requirements are diminishing very rapidly. And we see the new rules which are actually coming up as well. So this needs to be updated. So it's actually the EUDR, European Timber Regulations, will come into force on 29th of this month. 29th of June will come into force. And once it comes into force, it is essentially going to replace EUDR, but it's going to have an 18 months implementation time frame. So timber is actually part of it. So that means when you want to export to EU, same like what happened with EUDR, timber regulations, but it's not going to be timber regulations anymore, it's going to be deforestation regulations, which will actually look into beef, palm oil, soy, coffee, cocoa, rubber, as well as all derivatives out of that will actually need to declare, and you need to have credentials that this is not linked to any deforestation. It's not going to, this is what happened with EUDR. You need to actually have the due diligence being done. You need to know where the actual timber was originated. So we were a monitoring organization, so we also have our own standards like PLB to be compliant with the EUDR requirements. And what we also see is the ESG, policy transparency assessments are getting into a prominency. And one of the key ESG assessments is SPOTS. So SPOTS from Zoological Society of London looks into the 100 top timber companies in the world, and they rank these companies based on the ESG performance. So they have 3 indices, one for palm oil, one for timber and pulp, and one for natural rubber. So this is for the timber, and Samling is the top ranked company in Malaysia, even though they are under criticism for certain fronts. But overall, what the companies listed in Malaysia, they are ranked higher than the others. But there's a lot of things to improve still to go to the higher stage. So these ESG ratings tailored for forestry and timber sector is also mentioned. And we see when you want to export to EU markets or UK markets, you need to have the credentials of UK CA marking or CE marking, especially for construction timber. And we see from the market also, your suppliers, your buyers, there are various trends. We see very big demand for packaging products and brands, especially for paper and also for timber. And we see a huge demand for viscose and rayon, which most of our jackets and likewise are manufactured from wood fiber. Some of you may already wearing clothes from wood fiber. So these are not just coming from cotton and polyester, these are also coming from wood fiber. So even CNA and likewise, so there's a very big trend in towards these different market drives. And also for biomass, producing biomass sustainably, it's a very important thing. And one of the key topics now is actually when you are in the sector, that whether you have a net zero agenda in place. It's very important. What are you doing? How are you climate conscious? How are you carbon conscious? Do you want to have a project and make money out of it selling carbon credits, or you want to actually accelerate your net zero agenda, that you reduce your emissions and you be the corporate citizen? Because what the new UNFCCC reports suggest that we need to peak our anthropogenic emissions by next year. By 2024, we need to peak and then reduce by more than 40% by 2030 if we have to meet that 1.5C targets. So it's very important. It's not that, oh, I'm a small guy, I don't have to do much on this, only the big polluters will have to pay, and likewise. It's not that. And Malaysia is also deciding on a carbon pricing instrument which discusses about a carbon tax and an ETS going to come in Malaysia very soon. So hopefully next year this is actually going to come. So you need to actually look into this very careful. So we are accredited for all these certifications, and we are helping the Malaysian industry to get here. So, and also from the Malaysian master plan, the 12th master plan, it highlights on the need for responsible sourcing. So these are all the priority topics which you need to actually look into. So you need to have a way also to look into your scope 3, understand what you do, because it's very difficult for small companies to understand how they are doing. Okay, should I hire a consultant, pay 100,000 ringgit to come with a sustainability report and advocate me? But there are a lot of tools. One of the tools is GSES systems. You can actually do a self-assessment and see where you are, identify what areas you need to improve, and more importantly, track your suppliers, track your buyers, upstream and downstream issues. So these are also where it's going. And one of the key issues for the Malaysian industry is when it comes to labor. Malaysia is a hotspot for migrant workers. So social concerns are the most concerning things for the Malaysian industry as we speak. Whether it's high recruitment fees, housing and living conditions, false promises, excessive overtime, non-payment of wages, isolated work environment, violence and likewise. So it's very important that you consider on all these aspects, especially when it comes to forced labor. Malaysia is a big issue. You know what happened to the top companies in Malaysia for the glove sector, on the palm sector. Most of these companies has to pay hundreds of billions just on recruitment fees alone. So don't consider you are a small player, but if you want to access certain markets, access certain buyers, you need to have this in place. And it's not forced labor, does not mean that you are tied to some place anymore. It's going far beyond on abuse of vulnerability, deception, restriction of movement, isolation, debt bondage, excessive overtime and various topics. So there are various social schemes available also for you to actually, so most of the timber companies are getting certified for SMETA, social and labor convergence as well. And then once you know what the material topics, you have to come with your plans, but then you have to be responsive, that you should act transparently in the material sustainability topics that are related and related impact. It's not only about what you do right, it's also about what you need to improve. You need to be transparent on that. And then, of course, end of the day, you need to communicate and come with that impact and communicate. So one of the ways to communicate is actually through sustainability reports, sustainable disclosures. So but you can write a lot of things, but also there has to be some credibility behind. So we are an A1000 approved assurance provider for all the sustainability claims. And our final message to you, because we are already up for time, is that it's not a separate department anymore. You as companies will have to be stakeholder inclusive, not just limiting to within your walls, but going out and being inclusive, being transparent, what you do right, what you do, what you have to improve, and most importantly, integrate sustainability to your corporate strategy. This is actually the only way to survive and thrive. A lot of people say compliance is difficult. Compliance costs money. So I would just like to end my discussion with the statement from a former US Deputy Attorney General. If you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. Then you will see how much more expensive it is. So with this, I would like to end the discussion. Any questions, if there is any, we would more than be happy to ask. We have a stall as well. You can just come into our stall. So hopefully this was a good session. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to take. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Supun. So, hold on for a bit. Any questions from the floor? Okay. Because of time. Yes.
Currently, how many Malaysian companies has engaged your services, that is, products or services, the product certified?
Yeah, so at the moment, normally the big brass companies, the listed companies, the companies in the lead market, they are the ones who are basically driving because it's a mandatory requirement for them. So we work with a lot of, because we are the world's largest certifier for palm oil. So we work with all the way companies from MWE to Saindabis to IOI and likewise. So palm has been a very driving force. We work with a lot of glove companies for social, only for social requirements, because social is the most priority topic for them. So it all comes down to drivers. But what we don't see is the small and medium scale industries adopting these tools to uplift themselves. So that's where I think the associations like MTC, MTA will have to actually play their role in getting the small and medium sector also to understand if you want to go to certain markets, you may need to comply with this any which way. So it's a market opportunity, not a risk or not a threat.
Mr. Supun. So now we have come to the end of our Pocket Talk session today. For today, on behalf of the organizer of MWE, we would like to thank Mr. Supun for the very informative presentation just now and all the people that attended for our today's section. But not to forget that we are going to have another round of Pocket Talk sessions tomorrow, starting at 11 o'clock to start with the polished brown wood market. So do join us at 11 o'clock, same slot, not the same time, okay? Same place. And thank you. Have a great day. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.